Hey, good morning, everyone. I am super excited to see this community at the kickoff. So much energy in the room. I'm so excited about this work and what's going forward. Incredible diligence has gone into being where we're at. Next slide. So I'd like to talk to you about where that passion for ISAM capabilities came from. This has been with me for a long time, but I will go back to my experience as an astronaut. My generation of astronauts helped to build the International Space Station, and that included the on-orbit assembly, servicing, and maintenance of one of the most magnificent engineering feats that has ever occurred, which is the International Space Station. As you can imagine, on-orbit assembly, servicing, and maintenance is very near and dear to my heart because of the personal experiences that I had doing that. During my first mission, our crew brought up two elements to the space station. In 2000, we used something called Space Vision System. When I tell experts in machine vision that we used operationally machine vision in 2000, which was really basically just a twinkle in a lot of academicians' eyes, they cannot believe that we use this technology that way, operationally in a critical way. But it was absolutely essential because we simply did not have the cameras on board the space station to provide those orthogonal views for safety, and only a handful on the space shuttle. So we really had to have this additional capability. And those white dots in their black circles are near and dear to my heart because of that. On my second flight, we brought up the S1 truss, which is the radiator assembly for the International Space Station. There's one on the port and one on the starboard side. I should point out that we also had a failure of the robotic arm to transfer a critical piece of hardware, actually a new camera that was needed for future assembly tasks. And our two spacewalkers had to manually carry an enormous camera all the way out to the end of the S1 truss. And on my third flight, probably the most dramatic example of on-orbit assembly, servicing, and maintenance, we were relocating the original solar array that had been put on the space station and putting it out and then unfurling it. The previous crew had folded it up. Now, before we launched, I said, are we gonna have any trouble with this thing? Because we'd had a lot of trouble with that solar array. We had trouble unfurling it because it was the first one. We had a lot of trouble getting it folded back into the box. And I was told, no, it's just a thermal issue. We totally understand that. Yeah, well, it didn't go that way. So when we tried to open it up and unfurl it, we did pretty well. One wing went out without any difficulty. The other one got about 2/3 of the way out, and then it began to tear. So all that banging that we'd done on it to get it to deploy, but also to fold back up in the box, had actually caused a snarl in the cables that were used to provide structural integrity. So we had to do an extraordinarily dangerous spacewalk, send our two spacewalkers out. One of them, we couldn't even figure out how to get him out there without kludging the two robotic systems of the shuttle and station together to get him all the way out. He couldn't touch it. The solar array was fully electrified, 150 volts DC. We didn't think the shock would kill him if he touched it. The doctors told us probably not, but it would kill all the electronics which were keeping him alive. So anyway, I didn't get a whole lot of sleep that night, I can tell you that, before we sent him out. But we were successful. Fortunately, I had Scott Perezinski, who's an emergency medical physician. So I said, are you ready to stitch up the patient? And he did. He did it beautifully. But it was pretty nerve-wracking. And it just highlighted again the critical nature of having multiple orthogonal views when you do something like this, because Doug Wheelock was at the base of the solar array, and he saw the one time when Scott came very close to touching the solar array, he was the only person who could see it from his view. The bottom line is we had a lot of drama Every single one of my flights had a problem during rendezvous. And every single one of my flights had a huge challenge with assembly, servicing, and maintenance. So I think in my heart of hearts, I know how incredibly important it is, because look at what we're getting out of the station today. It's extraordinary, the science. And so you can build unbelievable capability with this technology, but it's also pretty darn scary. So really, in my mind, when I went to DARPA and began to understand the great leaps we were seeing in robotics here on the ground and in autonomy, I was like, wow, we have got to figure out a way to use this on orbit. It's safer for humans if we can. Now, I know that the human is never going to be completely eliminated out of this, but it's incredibly important that we figure out ways to do human-machine teaming that are safer and more effective. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about why. I do want to actually also highlight that this is, of course, capability that grew out of our Hubble capability. Servicing Hubble was just an amazing experience for us, helped us develop so many tools and approaches. And I'm also really proud of the work that NASA has done to advance the capability for refueling, both on the space station and with our OSAM-1 mission. I also want to point out, though, that this is going to be ongoing work. If you look at our commercial LEO destinations, which is the follow-on to ISS, we have 3 groups of companies working together, three individual groups that are trying to develop the next commercial space station in low Earth orbit. And I'm telling you, they all get it. They have to have robotic assembly and servicing and repair going forward. Next slide, please. I'd just like to remind everybody that ISAM capabilities are not just limited to Earth orbit. As critical as we need them and the emerging commercial capabilities, there are other opportunities ahead for us. And I'd really like to emphasize that. So as I think some of you probably know or have heard, we have a strategy with the ultimate goal of a sustained, responsible human presence for science and exploration throughout the solar system. We are going to develop that blueprint by starting on the moon. And when we think we have a recipe, we're going to go demonstrate it on Mars, and then we're going to pick the next location that humans should go to maximize our science output. One of the challenges we have, though, is the moon is 3 days away. So if you're going to send an astronaut to do science for 30 days with a 3-day trip to and from, that's actually a pretty good return on investment. And I'd just like to remind everyone, we learned a lot from the space shuttle, but one of the things we learned is if we really want to get the most out of the risk of sending humans to space and getting the most science out of it, that's why we built the space station, so we could do science 24/7. And other than the moon, anywhere else inside the solar system is going to need infrastructure to support humans for longer periods of time. Really, it's okay for a test flight to send a crew for 30 days to Mars on a 2-year round trip, but long term, that's really not a very good return on investment. We've got to figure out how to sustain humans for longer, and infrastructure like communications, power, navigation, mobility, manufacturing, and construction are all going to be essential to do that. Next slide, please. So I can just give you a very simple example of how this is going to unfold, and that is at Gateway. So in our early missions, for example, in Artemis 4, astronauts are going to perform the on-orbit assembly and activation of Gateway, 250,000 miles away from Earth. They will bring the International HAB module, the IHAB, with them when they set off on their journey and rendezvous. Using advanced robotics and proximity operations, IHAB is going to dock with Orion to the PPE and Halo modules on Gateway. And after docking, astronauts are going to go in and activate Gateway. However, big difference from ISS. Gateway is actually human-tended, which means there's not a permanent presence. We are going to need huge leaps in autonomous robotics and autonomous assembly capability and other capabilities to enable Gateway to be functional. And these are all going to pave the way for more robust space capabilities in the future. So I want to make sure that your eyes are not just on the prize in low Earth orbit, but all the other things that are going to be enabled by that. Next slide, please. Here's another example. On-orbit refueling. We're proud of the work that we've done. We continue to work with our partners on both refueling in space as from an operational standpoint, but also from a technology demonstration standpoint. And both of our human lander systems rely on refueling to make them work. SpaceX's Starship is refueled in low Earth orbit. Blue Origin's Blue Moon lander is intended to be refueled in the near rectilinear halo orbit around the moon. This emphasizes the fact that the technologies that we're maturing here in Earth orbit are going to be critical for the future. And I encourage you as a community of practice to recognize the broader implications of what you're doing. And it's not just about the moon either. Just like to remind you, this is about the whole solar system. So that's your business market. Next chart, please. So we do know that as we go forward, this infrastructure is going to be critical for the reasons I outlined, having to do with human presence that endures. We also know that if we try to expect that every piece of infrastructure that we have, or the construction that is needed to support both our science and also to sustain human life, if humans have to do everything, that's just really not going to work for us. So I'd just like to also point out that everything that we do on the moon, we got to figure out how to dispose of it, or it's there forever. And so I really think we should be thinking about reuse cases. Now, I know this is a community that cares a lot about space sustainability. It's totally obvious to everybody that the technologies that support ISAM also support debris remediation, but also recycle and reuse of on-orbit capabilities. And I'd like to emphasize that that recycle, reuse, and sustainability model has to extend throughout the solar system, especially to the surface of other planets. They're absolutely incredibly important. We'll really need advanced robotics and manufacturing to enable this vision. And the work that you will do together as a part of the Cosmic Consortium and this community of practice is going to enable far more, perhaps, than you originally envisioned. Next slide, please. So Earth orbit is already showing a demand signal for commercial, but I want you to know that there is a government demand signal for government needs beyond Earth orbit for ISAM technologies. I want you to think about, yes, we are a customer and are sustaining our presence in low Earth orbit and GEO, but think about what we're going to need at the moon. And these are foundational technologies that we're working on that are going to enable so much. When I look at the impact that the technologies individually but also collectively have, you look at manufacturing here on Earth, it supports everything we do. It's absolutely critical. When you see the way robotics are being used in everything from medicine to manufacturing to other technologies, these are like foundational things that actually are transformational. So I just want to emphasize again how much this is going to impact not just what we're doing in Earth orbit today, but beyond. I'd also like to say that to build this ecosystem, collaboration is going to be key. One of the things some of you may have heard me say, because it's absolutely applies in this place, is we need to collaborate to compete. Standards, cooperation, figuring out how to work together, those things are going to be really, really important. So this is a community that can bring forward issues that affect all of us and each and every one of you, and enhance your knowledge about it, bring you up to speed, but also, more importantly, create partnerships. And there will be opportunities, just as we have shown with the Lunar Surface Innovation Consortium, where competition opportunities come forward, they're widely promoted, and then teams begin to form inside that consortium. I really think that this is a potential capability for this consortium as well, and that's incredibly important. You know, when I was in industry, and especially on boards and advising small companies, they kept asking me, how do I know when the next thing is coming out? And so it's one of the things I love about the Lunar Surface Innovation Consortium is that they post those opportunities and really widely advertise them. And I expect Cosmic to do the same thing for all the opportunities that come forward that are relevant to the technologies that you're building. So we're counting on you to create that capability to operationalize but bring down costs as well, and build new business models to make servicing routine in space architectures and in mission life cycles. And that includes every element here. We see that in these technology development streams, that academia performs the important basic research, but also often provides key frameworks of how to describe things, how to advance things, and then identifying where the gaps are. And then we move on to applied technologies, and then ultimately to business cases. So this is really why we have consortiums. They're really awesome for building a community. And I'm just very excited at this moment. It's one of the conversations that I had, probably one of the first conversations that I had in this position with Jim Reuter, then the head of STMD, about how do we build a community just like we have in other areas. So yes, there's other, other things, other people see the value in this. This isn't just some grand idea. We recognize this is supporting the competitiveness of the United States. It's growing domestic manufacturing capability. If you take a look at the White House National Science and Technology Council's ISAM strategy and implementation plan, we're all on the same page, is the bottom line. We all recognize this is a critically important work. I do want to highlight the fact that there are other consortiums with other purposes out there. Confers, Logic, and LSIC all have areas that can potentially intersect with the work that you're doing, but they each have a unique purpose. And I think it's really great to see the work that some of those consortiums that have gone before, and it's the promise, and maybe that's the reason why we have a good turnout today. That's what I'm hoping, and I've got my fingers crossed, that that's why you're all here, because you see the promise of it as well. Next slide, please. So to borrow a line from the administrator, space is the place. This is where things are happening. The transformative changes that have happened just over the last decade only signal the acceleration of the technologies and the use of space for all humanity in multiple ways. We are going to see another decade of technological revolution, and bringing this community together means that you can direct it, guide it, surf it to the maximum benefit. That's really how it should be. It's really wonderful to do foundational research. I think that's really important. But when you focus on solving a problem, that's when huge leaps and bounds are made. We've seen over 170 launches globally so far this year. Astounding. And orbital debris mitigation, as I mentioned, has become a real concern. It's time to routinely build with reuse, maintenance, and servicing in mind. And Cosmic is here to do that. It's here to make ISAM a routine part of every mission's life cycle. So I'm really happy to see you all here. I'm happy to be here at this moment with you, thinking about everything from new technologies, synergies, new business markets, all the steps that have to be taken. So this is just a huge personal pleasure for me to be here at the kickoff today. And I have a few minutes to answer questions if people have any questions for me on any topic, hopefully about maybe my passion for ISAM has come through. So hopefully about ISAM, but always here to talk to the community about anything that you're interested in. Thank you. So we have a microphone over here. If you just have a question, raise your hand. I don't think this community is shy. You never have been before. You always tell me what you think. there's one over there.
Good morning. Thank you for a great talk. It was really, I think a lot of us, as you said, are passionate about sustainability and reuse. And I think we all have a sense that if we plan for that in advance, that's going to go probably a lot better for us. But I know that there, for a lot of missions, there are pressures to not have that be a focus, especially in the beginning when you're doing something first. How do you see that development, and how do you think that we could all support the development of a sustainable technology?
Yeah, that's a great point. You're absolutely right. There's tremendous pressure. And I think one of the other things that I'll highlight, because we're seeing this through our Moon to Mars program and our strategy, is that the first time you do something, you actually don't know what's going to work and what isn't. And so when you add additional requirements in before you've actually demonstrated the operational capability, it can be very hard. I really think that this needs to be a requirements situation, but I think we're going to find out. Station is a great example of this. We had a grand vision for ISS, and I can tell you that there are parts of it that succeeded beyond our wildest dreams, that we use in ways that we never imagined, that we're getting greater capability out of. And there are pieces not so much, right? There's a couple of examples where we've been like, wow, we really thought this was going to be the be-all, end-all. For example, monitoring the atmosphere for certain constituencies. And then when we started operating, we were like, oh, we got that one completely wrong. We had to develop new hardware to go on the station to do the job because what we had originally envisioned just wasn't working, or we found out it was not doing what was most important to keep humans alive and to sustain science. So I think we're in that, especially going forward to the moon, we are in that squishy place right now. I do not think we are in that squishy place in Earth orbit. And so if any of you were at Ascend, you heard me talk about the critical nature of having clarity around regulatory frameworks for on-orbit novel space activities. I'm not in a rush to regulate. We're not a regulator. NASA's not a regulator. I've been a regulator. But I also learned from that experience it takes 5 to 7 years to pass a major rule. So I'm thinking things are looking kind of rocky already in low Earth orbit. Maybe we should at least have clarity about who's in charge of what. And that's important to us at NASA so that we know who to engage with on these subjects, especially as it refers to responsible behavior of our own activities. So I will just say I think it's really important for the U.S. government to have its act together around this and just say who's in charge, because if you don't have that, you never even are able, you don't even know who to start the conversation with. So ultimately, we should be thinking about full life cycle. ODMSP, which NASA is very proud of their role in developing the orbital debris mitigation standard practices. Sorry. Are good enough, but they were good. They were amazing and revolutionary 20 years ago. I think it's time for an update, and I think we all agree on that. And that would be the next step. So this needs to go beyond just a coalition of the willing.
Hi, ma'am. Lee Rosen from Think Orbital. You talked about demand pull, and NASA has some great programs like CLD and Ignite and things like that. Do you see new programs coming online anytime soon to support this community?
Yeah, it's a great question. We've got some work to do. I'm looking at STMD. Right now, our Moon to Mars effort is very focused on flight test. We have to demonstrate the capabilities of Orion and SLS and eventually a human lander. And even incorporating Gateway it's all flight test. It's your set of objectives is to actually make sure that they work the way and you can map out what they do and what problems and what issues they have. If you do not do that, you can't do all the great and exciting science you want to do, and we're going to have some real challenges with infrastructure as well, unless we actually know what the needs are. So. Fortunately, I do not think on a 5-year horizon. I'm thinking more on a 20-year horizon for the agency, and we're all thinking that way. And that is actually the job of our technology directorate is to look at those kinds of time horizons. So our challenge is to figure out how to do tech infusion and how these new technologies will actually be used to enable capability. And any of you who've ever done tech transition before, it's a combat sport. So even inside the agency, it's really hard. But I think we've taken great steps by having a single strategy for the agency and a list of objectives that are very clear to everybody that we have to meet. And those objectives, not just including the science objectives, they include our infrastructure objectives and our operations objectives. So it's my hope that as we evolve the architecture going forward, we see a lot more of that coming in at the early end of requirements development. That's what we really need. We really need to visualize how the technologies that you all in this room care about so much can actually make our architecture more efficient and how we can meet our objectives better. It's intuitively obvious to all of us, but that step is still in process. So next week, we're going to have our second architecture concept review, and that's intended to be a place where people ask really hard questions. And this is definitely a topic that will come up.
Hi, I'm Craig Harrigan from University of Maryland and NASA Goddard Space Flight Center. And as a roboticist, I think one of my biggest concerns is like interfaces and common interfaces. We've hosted like several workshops at international robotics conferences, and it comes up over and over. Like if JAXA and ESA are developing, different interfaces, how are we going to deal with that? And if this organization is only focused on U.S. efforts, like how does all that come together? Because I feel it has to happen at the very beginning.
Yeah, thanks so much. I think right now, this COSMIC is definitely focused on domestic capability, and there are reasons for that. It's tied to domestic manufacturing and capability. I just kind of want to flag, that's actually what Confers is supposed to be doing, is working on standards and interoperability. If you think you should be working together with them, and COSMIC is a good place to do that, I would encourage that. But that is one of the things that and they do have international participation. So if you're not familiar with Confers, you need to get familiar with it, because that's exactly what they're focused on.
From online, from Colleen Stover, you had mentioned demand signals beyond LEO from the government. Can you expand upon this topic?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit like the question that was asked by Think Orbital, which is how that works is that requirements have to be driven. Now, the great thing about STMD is they have the opportunity to think pre-requirements, but in the end, everybody has to agree that there's something that we need. And we have work to do inside the agency on that. We all know that, but I don't see any of this working for us in the future for the reasons that I've outlined without the technologies that you're working on and maturing and making more operational in low Earth orbit. So we have work to do inside the agency. We're going to give you a little time to mature in Earth orbit while we get our act together inside NASA. But I'm giving you the heads up that the signal is coming. The demand signal will be there. But this is pretty tough stuff when you're doing it 250,000 miles away from Earth. So we're ready to take a leap on some tech investments, but I do think that we'd like to see greater maturity in certain areas, but this is the step of bringing this community together to do just that. And with that, thank you very much. I hope you have a fantastic and productive kickoff.